before, but I'll make sure. Oh, I'm live. Hey, everybody, we're live. How you doing? And I'm proud to reintroduce my now good friend Mike Jacobs, because we talk all the time. I said Jacobs, but it's Jacob. So anyway, that's kind of like Zinni Abrams. You know, a lot of people call me Abrams, but it's Abraham. And, I get a lot of razzing about that. But welcome, my friends. I'm just going to do one thing I want to make absolutely certain I'm doing, although people have already apparently marked this, and I'm happy that they have. I want to make absolutely certain, and when this comes up, cool. I want to make absolutely certain this is on Facebook so somebody can see this. I put this on again, but I'll make sure everyone knows we're live right now. And in utmost transparent apologies, folks, this has been an explosive day. Pun not intended. Okay, I'm going to get that one out of the way.
Busy Friday.
Yeah, exactly. And now we're live. Everybody knows that we're live. And one more sharing of the fact that we're live. And I'll put it right here. Hashtag Oakland on Twitter. Hashtag live stream. Hashtag live. There we go. All right, cool. And voila. All that. Now I can get rid of all those pages because they suck up RAM. And down to where I'm at. How you doing?
Awesome. Great.
Hey.
Thank you.
Everybody knows how we roll, folks. My guests do the talking more than I do. There is one thing I want to get out. I was going to play it, but I think in the interest of time, since I'm late, out of respect for your time, I'll just ask you, what did you think of Dave Kaval's, first of all, interview with me regarding his comment, which is really shockingly dismissive, and then the day after that, before the Oakland City Council?
Well, thanks for having me on in that context too, Zinni, because I think this is really kind of where rubber hits the road on a lot of issues with the council meeting coming up on the 20th and discussions about the term sheet. And, we're from where we're sitting right now, we're fighting to get some respect from the A's for our issues. And I think that's really what you were asking, and what you were hearing from Dave Kaval the last couple of days, and on some of the radio spots that I was doing with him too, is just a dismissal of our issues and pretending we don't exist. And the longer you put your head in the sand, the more we go away. And as I've told you offline, when that's the response, our only way to counter that, I guess, is to get louder. And so that's what we're doing. You and I have talked about this before. I talked about it a lot with other people. You can have different opinions about whether or not you think the project is good or bad, whether or not you should redevelop that area of Oakland, your thoughts about industrial policy versus accommodating housing pressures or providing a venue for sports. Those are totally legitimate debates. And that's what land use planning is, right? It's a community saying, here's the set of priorities that I want to emphasize with this type of allocation of land for certain uses. Or here are the health and safety parameters that I want to put around allowing uses to be compatible or not in areas. Those are good debates to have, because you have to, right? If you're going to grow, you're going to create friction between uses, and you need to accommodate those. So that's, reasonable minds can disagree. That's where you and I are on a lot of this stuff, and it's totally legitimate. It's fine. It can be done respectfully. But let's say I lose on that debate. Everyone, including the mayor, including the A's, including the port, and everyone who's reasonable on both sides, has said publicly and agrees that if you are going to move forward with it, you have to deal with the practical implications of such a huge transformation of that neighborhood and its location right next to what we do at the port. And so we all know what those issues are. Are you going to keep trucks moving? Are you creating new space for us to move those areas where we do work now into new locations? Do we have elbow room to grow in the future? Are the trains still moving? And can we turn ships and keep growing the size of our vessels? Those aren't surprises to anybody. So to turn around and say, on the one hand, make his arguments for why he wants to transform Oakland, totally legitimate. To turn around and then say, but I'm not going to deal with their issues if I win my way in that debate, and that our issues don't exist. And frankly, that's just stupid. It's insulting, and it gets to a point where you got to ask yourself, is he serious about dealing with these issues? And that's tough. That's the place we find ourselves.
Hey, FYI, I happened to find the section of clip I can play.
Sure.
To get an idea what we're talking about here. And here it is, folks. This is the area. I believe it's at the 1868 mark, according to the transcript. I'm going to play it right now. And this is Mr. Kaval. Yeah, there we go. Here we go.
At all, or his people?
Let me go right back here. Here we go.
We have successes. It's just, that's another long story. Hey, I'm getting some questions here. Most of them probably goosed by my friend, our mutual friend, Mike Jacob. And one of them I'll take from my friend Rick Gray, who wants to know, he has another question basically about if you have a plan for the seaport there, the maritime-oriented plan, and have you had a chance to talk with Mike? Or I think you're on the radio with him, but privately at all, or his people?
Well, we don't think their concerns are warranted. We made a lot of concessions to the maritime community as part of the port agreement that was unanimously voted on over 2 years ago. It included having the turning basin possibility, giving up 10 acres of the site, having a transportation plan that really segregates the trucks from pedestrian and car activity, and that's a lot of the infrastructure that's being invested. And then having a buffer zone where we're not going to have housing on the most western part of the site, the 55 acres, to make sure there's space between the maritime and industrial interests and the commercial side. So we feel that we have a really good plan. It's 2% of the port property. It's going to have no bearing on how the port operates. No one's going to lose any jobs. And I really think it's more about fear-mongering around pollution and things of that nature, which is really sad that it's come down to that. But our project is going to clean up a lot of these areas. It's going to right some long-standing wrongs in West Oakland with environmental justice. And we are proud of our record. And even the lawsuit that we won against Mr. Steele just a couple months ago that basically says that they can't transmit hazardous waste through Oakland anymore. So regardless if this project ever goes forward or anything happens, that's something we're proud that we were a part of, because that's a good thing for society in general.
And shifting back to Las Vegas,
that was pretty much flat there. So what are your responses there?
I think what you're hearing there from Dave is really the source of a lot of our ongoing issues and concerns. He can't say that he's going to live in concert and harmony with us and we don't have any issues, and then turn around and say, but I'm going to clean them up, I'm going to run them out of town, and I'm going to make sure they don't operate anymore. You can't say both of those things with a straight face, and that's where the issue here comes in. I mean, what we're looking for are a couple different things. One, with respect to the EIR, we're looking for a really full accounting of all of those environmental impacts. So there is direct mitigation that's paid for out of this project. And two, as a business matter, with the Seaport Compatibility Measures process, Dave referred to some of the concessions that they put out there. Well, we don't think they're concessions. We think that they're processes that the port said, here are things you need to do with us, i.e. the port, to address these issues of seaport compatibility. And so those processes are set up. But the processes are set up to then go back to a negotiation between the port and the A's. And the A's can always say no. So we need to create the ability to have that conversation from a business perspective. What are the measures that need to go in place so the port and the A's really, stay true to their word about seaport compatibility? And those two things need to happen in parallel. We need to have the process going forward on the EIR, and then on the flip side, we need to have the business process going forward, and then those need to be paid for. So the same kind of conversation that I think you've been having with the public and with Dave and the A's, the city council and the city staff are having now with the A's, the community is having with the A's through the community benefits agreement process. That's the same conversation we're trying to have, which is nailing down what are they going to be paying for, what does the infrastructure needs of the city look like if the project moves forward. And our issues, unfortunately, are complex, they're time consuming, and they're expensive. And so when you're looking at this site, I think what you're hearing from Dave is we don't want to deal with issues that are complex because we're trying to move this forward quickly. We don't want to deal with issues that are time consuming because we're trying to move this forward quickly. And we don't want to deal with items that are expensive because they just don't want to deal with other items that are expensive either. I don't blame them. That's the job of the developer. But it's the job of the city and the port to sit down and say, there's a bigger context here. And I think one of the places where you and I might be on different sides of the debate about what does the urban fabric down there need to look like, but on the practical side, we're on the same place, which is if you move forward with this, there's a lot of value that can be built out of it that should be spent on all these other infrastructure and mitigation measures. And so that's the thing that we're trying to get our handle around. So ironically, when I hear the A's and Dave talk about all the but-for, financing that they're going to be able to finance, they're right. They're creating a lot of value there that doesn't exist on the tax rolls. There's also a lot of but-for costs they're presenting, but they're off the rolls. Right. So things, and there was a slide about that the other day that city staff put up about the city costs and revenue. That's not a full accounting of all the project. Our costs are operational, right? And our costs are and infrastructure will never show up on the city's books. So that's the debate that has to happen, and it requires people to be mature and sit down at a table and say, what's really happening here? And so, like I said, I think when we hear from council members, they know that these are real issues. They don't think that we're fear-mongering or we're just here out of spite. It's almost like Dave thinks we're just doing this for fun. Believe me, there's plenty of other things we'd rather be talking about than this, but this is where we are.
Why does he, it seems to me, all of a sudden feel emboldened to take a dismissive tone, in your opinion?
I don't think it's new. I think it's unfortunate, but we have not had a working partner in the A's for some time. So maybe it's because he is being aggressive on litigation already. He's filed 2 suits directly against Schnitzer. Maybe it's because he's still in litigation over what rules are going to apply to his EIR with respect to the review. I don't know. Maybe he's just actually being really just strategic about saying, I don't want to have to negotiate on these expensive items for as long as I can to avoid multiple bites at the apple. That would be logical as a developer trying to do that. Or just devalue the impetus for people to deal with our issues altogether. And those last 2 things, I think, are logical from his point of view. And does he have an incentive to deal with our issues if he thinks he can talk around them? Nope. But that's not a long-term strategy for getting to yes. And I think that's the same thing that we're seeing with the community fund, right? Where instead of engaging with the community and building up a discussion with the community where he's actually building blocks towards successful agreement, what he's basically saying is, regardless of whether or not you like how they're proposing to fund the community fund, he's basically saying, I'm just giving you money. Figure it out. But also, here's the amount I'm giving you. But without telling you how we got to that number. Right? It's not because he's doing community project A and community project B and community project C, and you add those up and it gets to a number. Mm-hmm. Do that. He just said, here's your number. And he knows he can't do that with us. We're going to come back and we're going to say, here are infrastructure projects we want you to pay for.
Right.
And we're going to be giving him a timeline for these things. Like, on the not my direct issue at PMSA, but as one of our alliance partners is Union Pacific Railroad, they're not only asking for a full grade separation of the site, they're asking for a full grade separation of the site for the construction traffic. And that's what they're pushing back on. Can you imagine what it does for his construction timeline if you have to actually put in the grade separations early? And, that I think that's the kind of complication that they're looking at, and they're saying, wow, this isn't good. On our side, it's the same thing with the turning basin. Yeah, on paper, the turning basin is part of the non-binding term sheet with the port, but it's a non-binding term sheet item. They haven't agreed to anything. Yeah. So we're concerned that essentially what that says is if the Army Corps of Engineers doesn't move quickly, which it's not known for, all of a sudden they have some sort of springing entitlement to what bridge that we need to turn chips. That's scary. So anyways,